Hello. welcome to our next week of the Everlasting Man Book Club. This week we'll be discussing chapter 2, and we have with us Ted Janiszewski, our special guest, and a surprise host. Dale Olquist is joining Grettelyn and myself to discuss this chapter. We are so happy to have everybody here, and we are happy to have all of you here. We've been following the chat. We've seen people all the way from Tokyo, Washington State, Texas, all over the place. It's amazing. So very, very pleased and glad to have you back. I want to start off with a brief introduction, most importantly of Ted, because he's our special guest. Everybody knows that Dale's the president of the Society of GKC, and Grettelyn's our beautiful podcast host, and I'm the local societies coordinator. But Ted, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And then all of us, including those of you in the chat, are going to let us know when you first read Chesterton and what you thought about it. Dale has shared some of his story before, so we're all familiar with that. But, it's interesting. People have different reactions to Chesterton when they first encounter him. So Ted, please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Absolutely. So first of all, I want to say I'm so honored to be a special guest. I feel like I've much more to learn from you folks. I'm just really looking forward to delving into this. So I'm the director of St. Irenaeus Ministries here in Rochester, New York, and I live in a library. And people come to my house and ask me questions about the Bible. So I'm pretty much living the dream. It's a wonderful life. And about Chesterton, my first encounter with G.K. Chesterton was. It's interesting. It was actually not G.K. Chesterton directly, not G.K. Chesterton himself. The head of the Rochester, New York Chesterton Society, Lou Horvath, gave a men's breakfast talk, and it was just the greatest hits of Chesterton's orthodoxy, and I was absolutely floored by it. I had never heard. I mean, it was laugh out loud funny, but it was so wise. And I said, I've got to get a hold of this. And actually, the first G.K. Chesterton book that I actually read through myself was The Everlasting Man when I was an undergraduate in college.
Oh, wonderful. It's such a great book. So, Thank you and welcome. And I'm glad you're here. And Grettelyn, I haven't heard your story yet about when you first read Chesterton and what you thought of it.
It's a great one. I get to throw a friend of mine under the bus every time I tell it. So a good friend of mine in college, we were both poetry students. He's now a priest, bless him. But he said, you have to read this author. And I trusted him because we had come to learn that we recommended good things to each other. He said, here, it's called The Man Who Was Thursday. It's by G.K. Chesterton. It's wild. You have to read it. It's in the library. So I go to the library. I was working at the library at the time. I could not find it. And I looked up who had it, and guess who had it? He did. So very fortunately, I lived in I was at St. Vincent College at the time. They have one of the greatest Chesterton collections I've ever seen. But of course, I had no clue. And so I read Tales of the Longbow.
Oh.
Which, it's a weird one. I've never met anyone else who's read. You probably have, Dale, but nobody else who's ever read it. And I got through the first chapter thinking, this is so dumb. This is so dumb. What is he doing? This is stupid. I don't get this. But I had a policy back then. If a book was older than like 50 years, I would give it a whole chapter. So I did. And at the end, it blew my mind of that chapter. And I was like, all right, I'm going to read everything this guy has ever written. And that's the rest is history. So.
Oh, wow. That's phenomenal. How about you, Dale? You met Chesterton on your honeymoon?
Yeah, like everybody else.
Yes. And your wife ended up crying from what she was reading. That was
she was reading Les Miserables. I was reading The Everlasting Man. And the rest is history.
The rest is history. Beautiful. Yeah. And so I met Chesterton I was on a retreat and somebody suggested orthodoxy. And I remember reading it and just thinking, man, can this guy ever get to the point? Like, what's going on here? And I was so frustrated. And then my good friend, Nancy Brown, we were in the same social group, and she kept inviting me to Chesterton things, and she got me hooked on his essays. And, the nice thing about his essays is he's constrained. They had a word count. And so he has to get to the point. And for me, that was great. And now that I know his voice, I want him to just keep talking, and I could listen to him forever. I could just, it's like having a conversation with a good friend. But when I started, I found it a little inaccessible. So I think it's normal to have a range of experiences. Jeff Miller in the comments said that it was like getting thrown into the deep end of the pool. And I feel like that is a very good analogy. I know Nancy's first experience, she ended up burning a copy of Chesterton's Orthodoxy. And Nancy said in the comments. So we, all the way from burning it to falling in love, there are many reactions to Chesterton initially.
And
so
we should add that Nancy eventually won the Chesterton Society Lifetime Achievement Award.
She did.
Having started out by burning Orthodoxy.
So there's hope for the rest of us.
Hope for everyone.
There's hope for everyone. And Chesterton that's a recurring theme throughout his work. And we've seen it in our own lives. So I want to jump right into the text, and I want to start with, Dale's excellent questions in the back of the book. What is the main problem with our theories about prehistoric man? And I want to start with Ted. If you could give us a little bit of thoughts on that, and then Grettelyn and Dale, you can round it out.
Yeah, I would say very basically, it's that the prehistorians, the archaeologists, they're not skeptical enough, which is hilarious coming from G.K. Chesterton, who's a Christian and a believer. And so everybody says, well, how naive to imagine, the white-bearded man in the sky and so on, right? We're supposed to be the saps. And Chesterton, by the application of what I would say is a very salutary acid bath of criticism. He asks the hard questions, and he causes this entire house of cards, which is like all of the reconstructions that they spin off. He shows them just to be completely fanciful. They're castles built on air, and so I think that the main problem is he uses this this term on page 64. Darwinian dogmatism, right? And he says that they've forgotten to be agnostic, right? They loudly protest that they're the skeptics, that it's just the science, just the facts, ma'am, right? And really, they're failing to ask the hard questions. I really enjoyed in the commentary at the end of the chapter, the comment elsewhere in Chesterton's works about how the agnostics end up being not so much humble, not so much, agnostic about their own knowledge, but they're agnostic about everybody else's knowledge,
right?
Which doesn't seem like a fair maneuver, really. I don't know. What do you guys think? That's really what I came with, and I just enjoyed it. He's like riding around on this merry jaunt. It's like so delightfully Chestertonian, poking holes, and you just watch this whole edifice of the archaeologists, like the prehistory of man, kind of deflate and fall into this shoddy collection of a bit of cranium and femur bone, right? That's all that they actually had, and they use it to create this absolutely absurd story.
Right. And Chesterton is really, I think, distraught at the lack of empirical evidence.
Right.
We have these theories, and then it seems like we're shaping the evidence to fit the theory instead of starting with the evidence, as he does in his discussion of art and man, where he looks at the pictures and he says, well, what can we really tell from exactly what we see here? But we have a jawbone, and then we end up with a wild animal, and we end up with all of this stuff. And then there's another point that I thought was really interesting related to that, is that this idea that, it's been phrased as absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Mm-hmm. So this is a sort of aphorism, but he says that when he says, it is not contended here that these primitive men did wear clothes any more than they did weave rushes, but merely that we have not enough evidence to know whether they did or not. So let's not speculate. Let's talk just the facts, ma'am. Tell me what you know, and then we'll go from there. And I think it takes a certain humility, and Chesterton, had humility, and he knew what he didn't know. And I think that is that makes him more scientific than some of these scientists, who fail to understand that they are limited by their human understanding. Grettelyn.
Well,
what did you think?
Yeah, just to play off of that, I love the
Yeah.
part where he says that, you can't expect their hats to have kind of remained, presumably they would have rotted away. And then cheating a little because going off of your commentary, Dale, but he definitely had that beautiful section where he talks about, if somebody were to discover the factories in England, and they would probably deduce that maybe they wore iron clothing and all this ridiculous stuff. And you talk the same in your commentary section, Dale. But yeah, just this as you say, Ted, sort of a Don Quixote approach, rushing at this windmill, but actually taking it down, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so something about that. Okay, I use a lot of I teach Bible studies, and I use a lot of the church fathers in my teaching. So I've gotten, I still feel like a rank amateur, but I've gotten pretty deep into some of these texts. And something that I notice about the structure of the Everlasting Man is that it's actually very similar to certain of the great works of the church fathers. And it's I mean, I think it's a known fact that some of the greatest, like the absolutely most influential works of positive theology in the patristic period started as the correction of error, like Saint Irenaeus himself in Against Heresies. The first two books of it, it's 5 books. The first 2 books of Against Heresies, he's just describing, he doesn't even have to argue against Gnosticism, hardly at all. If you just describe what these people actually believe, it's so absurd on the face of it that you've refuted it, like it's over, right? And so when people try to read Saint Irenaeus, they make the mistake of beginning at the beginning, and it's just like, oh my gosh, here comes another Gnostic system. Oh, the pleroma. Oh, the emanations. Oh my gosh, gag me with a spoon, right? Will it ever end? Eventually, Irenaeus himself, gets so bored with it that he gets to book 3 finally, and he kind of like wraps his what do you call it staff table here, right? And he, is anybody still awake? All right. Okay, instead of describing all of these different ways of going wrong, I'm going to spend the rest of this treatise describing what Christianity actually is. And then books 3 through 5 of Against Heresies, it just absolutely soars. It is this gorgeous articulation of like a synthetic, absolutely like Catholic and Orthodox. It is the Christian faith, right? But he had to start by clearing the ground for it first, right? He had to get rid of the error before he could build up something like positive and beautiful and true. Or like in Augustine, the city of God against the pagans, right? The first 10 books, like before he can create the thought world of the Middle Ages, he has to do away with the erroneous thought world of Greco-Roman paganism. But like all of the classic parts of City of God are from books 11 through 22. It's like it's halfway through the thing. And I see Chesterton, like Chesterton has to get rid of all of these errors. And he's enjoying it, just the way that Saint Augustine, he makes fun of, like the fact that the Romans need 3 gods for doors, right? It's not just one god. You need a god for the lintel, and you need a god for the hinges, right? The door is too complex. One god couldn't handle it all, right?
Right.
Like this is Chestertonian. Chesterton in the first part of this book, he's perturbed by Wells. Wells moves him to want to do something. First, he's got to get rid of this error, and then he has space to do something beautiful.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is definitely the pattern that he takes. Dale, what else do you have to add on this point?
I think one of the main points out of this chapter is that Chesterton is responding to the development of science as God, which happened during the Victorian period, and it was a result of Darwin, but not because of Darwin himself, but because of his main evangelist, his main expostulator, Thomas Huxley. And Thomas Huxley is the one who invented the word agnostic. And as we've pointed out many, many times, the word agnostic is just simply the Greek version of the Latin word ignorant. And people will proudly say that they are agnostic, but no one will proudly say they are ignorant. But Thomas Huxley tried to give some dignity to the word that I don't know. But But what Thomas Huxley found in Darwin was a justification for his disbelief, that possibly there is a purely materialist explanation for existence. And Darwin maybe provides the scientific basis for that. And he then was the one most fundamentally responsible for the rise of scientism. The idea that a materialist explanation is more reliable than a theological one. And Chesterton is responding to that, saying, no, the scientists don't have any stronger ground to stand on than the theologians, as it were. And as has been pointed out, especially by Ted right now, that they weren't agnostic enough.
Yeah.
Right.
We
Absolutely.
need a critique of the critique, right?
Absolutely. So he's bringing us back around. And so then that leads perfectly into the next question. What happens when we dare to question the prevailing theories about prehistoric man, especially those explanations based on evolution? And I think the first is kind of a gut reaction that, oh, you're a literal 7-day creationist, you're simple-minded, if you don't subscribe to these theories, which Chesterton points out that nobody's even read The Origin of the Species. But if you don't swear your fealty to it, then you must be an ignoramus and you're a complete moron. And so then what happens, and sort of how do we counter that? How do we, Chesterton does a good job in this book, but practically speaking, how do we bring these arguments today to help counter this caustic worldview?
Where's that famous text? Dale will know about where Chesterton is talking of his advice to a young atheist, right? Is not to stop doubting, but to doubt more and more boldly until eventually he may start to doubt himself. Where is that?
Yeah, that's there. That's definitely one of his texts. You bet it is.
Chesterton Digital Library. Go chat. Go.
Oh yes.
Right.
It's in there.
I can look for it, but I don't want to leave this discussion. I can find it for you, Ted, but it's definitely out there. I mean, he definitely recommends it to there's a bit of it in orthodoxy that if you take any of the modern philosophies to their logical conclusions,
right,
it leads to madness because they simply do not work. And it is in another text where he says, "Yes, you skeptic, keep doubting everything until you doubt the very ground you're standing on, and you will fall through floor after floor of a bottomless universe."
Yeah. There's a great. Yeah, it does. There's a great quote in The Everlasting Man from page 76. He says, "A few very doubtful fragments are scraped together to suggest such an intermediate creature as the missing link, because it is required by a certain philosophy." And I think that's him just saying, this is a dogma, people. I
don't know if I ever used it in any of my footnotes because I haven't read this new edition that everyone's reading, but. But I know he does say that, if you have a missing link in a chain, you actually do not have a chain.
It's kind of definitional, isn't it? I love how he points out those things. So we're challenging this idea, and it's kind of a dangerous position because we can be called small-minded, and those are some of the things that happen. How do we counter it? Do we have a way to counter it? Are we still working on that?
I think there's an offense and there's a defense, and I think you've got to have a little bit of both to have a good ground game. And part of it is, Chesterton just shows us the way, right here is to use the enemy. Okay, Darwinism is known as the great destroyer of systems, right? It brought down all of the the medieval certitudes, yada yada, ushered in the modern era, and so on. That's the narrative. The thing is, it created its own system, and the system that it created is really quite shoddy and is vulnerable to the same kind of critique that it kind of it lauds itself on having launched on the previous certitudes that it's since replaced. So I think the poking fun and the deflating of these puffed up ideologies, I think that's going to be part of it. I think the other part, frankly, and the part that I'm more excited about is just simply bearing fruit, right? It's just showing that when you live with, in simple receipt of the grace offered you by God, and in simple faith and following his law, that you're happy and that you bear fruit and you thrive. And it's not just that you're whole, whereas you look around and you see everybody else is bleeding and they're wounded and they're lonely, right? And they're scared and anxiety is everywhere. That it's not just that you're whole, whereas the rest of the world is bleeding out, right? It's that you're overflowing, right? There's this abundance of life such that you can be generous and you can actually, give to these other folks. I was just talking with a young man who stopped by the center here. I'm watching him. He went from, so anxious that he could hardly even function to, really like coming into the church, to really getting healing. And now he's 1 year away from a degree in theology at Steubenville. And he is going to turn it around. And he, who was the recipient of hospitality and he was just thanking me for the time that I spent with him, and okay, he's going to turn around and he's going to do that for other people who are out there in the culture. And this ministry of like generosity and warmth. That's, I think, the greatest argument. Like the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And if you're going to a G.K. Chesterton society, you know that the pudding is good.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, the fruits, by their fruits we will know them. And that is really, for me, that's the point of Chesterton. Chesterton's fun and it's like a logic puzzle and he's really engaging and he stimulates my mind. But the thing that keeps me coming back is the fruit that I see in my life. Things change. He changes people. He changes perspectives. He really helps you to, encounter that everlasting man. So, I guess I could go on and on, but I'm kind of a fangirl.
Ted, the great Noel Culbertson has found the answer to your questions from the introduction to the Book of Job. That's where that's where that is. For the doubter to keep doubting, and then he'll doubt himself at the end. Yes, George.
Thank you, Noel. She is amazing. She is actually going to be here next week, so we'll be blessed to have her. So that's amazing. So how do most explanations of the origin of religion represent circular reasoning? That's the next question this guy that wrote the study guide had for us. So what do you think? I don't know. How do they represent the explanations? I found some stuff on page 73. It says, similarly, we cannot say that religion arose out of the religious forms because that is only another way of saying that it only arose when it existed already. Which seems to be part of what Wells was doing in his book, so that was something that Chesterton was poking fun at.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's that great line about how human civilization precedes human records.
Yes.
The absolute earliest stratum of every human civilization, they were already religious. Right. And so it's, okay, how did they come? We don't get. That's one of those things that Chesterton, in this salutary reminder, he's reminding the agnostics of their agnosticism. He's saying, you don't know that, right? And if I may,
please. Of course you may. Please do.
Artifact here.
Ooh.
This is Lou Horvath's own copy of H.G. Wells's The Outline of History.
Sweet.
And can I just read something? This is so delightful.
It's like a relic, really.
Right?
Yes, yeah. It is. It's
so brittle, right?
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
So
go for it. I want to hear it.
So okay, this is H.G. Wells, and this is what G.K. Chesterton. This is what he's poking holes in, and I just need to let it speak for itself. Okay, the great apes pair and rear their young. The young go in fear of the old male, and presently the young males rouse his jealousy and are killed or driven off. The females are the protected slaves of the old male. That is the general state of affairs with all slightly gregarious animals. and there is no reason to suppose that the sub-man differed in such respects. The fear of the old man was the beginning of social wisdom. And the old man, of course, is quoted by Chesterton on page 71, right? The young of the primitive squatting place grew up under that fear. Objects
You're killing Dale.
What's that?
You're killing Dale.
It's got like a
right?
lather fit.
Objects associated with the old man were probably forbidden, probably. Everyone was forbidden to touch his spear or to sit in his place, just as today, little boys must not touch father's pipe, sit in his chair. He was probably the master of all the women. The youths of the little community had to remember that. Their mothers taught them to remember that. Their mothers instilled into them dread and respect and consideration for the old man. A disposition to propitiate the old man. By the way, this is capital O, capital M. A disposition to propitiate even the old man, even after he was dead, is also quite understandable. He must have been an actor in many a primordial nightmare. One was not sure that he was dead. He might only be asleep or shamming. Long after an old man was dead, when there was nothing to represent him but a mound and a megalith, the women would continue to convey to their children how awful and wonderful he was. And being still a terror to his own little tribe, it was easy to go on hoping that he would be a terror to other and hostile people. In his life, he had fought for his tribe, even if he had bullied it. Why not when he was dead? One sees that the old man idea was an idea very natural to the primitive mind and capable of great developments. The fear of the father passed by imperceptible degrees into the fear of the tribal god. And thus we have religion, right? H.G. Wells, he solved it. That's where religion came from.
I wonder if that's not like psychological projection instead of like an attempt at anthropology, because it just seems like a little bit too on the nose. You know, what would Freud say about that? I don't know. It's Wells needs to be on a couch.
Pure facts. Anybody, it's indisputable what he's saying,
right? And I would say we have a moral imperative to explode this. Like, that's so ridiculous. Right. You have to make fun of that. You know, how can you not? You know, just like, oh, like how can you take yourself seriously talking like this?
It's hilarious.
Meanwhile, and Chesterton does kind of explode it in this sort of way, but every religion that you've ever heard of, can you think of a single one that hasn't started with some amazing event? Yeah. Didn't gradually evolve from being afraid of
imperceptible degrees.
Yes.
From you can't touch a spear to, you know.
Right. It was, you know, I went into a cave and an angel talked to me, or, you know, these crazy things happened.
I feel like his dad wouldn't let him touch his pipe, and he's still a little bitter. I think that's probably part of his thesis there. I'm not sure. But Chesterton, you know, he says here in the beginning of the chapter, and I just love it when Chesterton starts getting snarky. I'm like, I'm like, let's buckle up and enjoy. And he says, but if he has made a mistake about the arboreal habit of his ancestor, he cannot see his arboreal ancestor falling off of the tree. He cannot keep a caveman like a cat in the backyard and watch him to see whether he really does practice cannibalism or carry off his mate on the principles of marriage by capture, you know, and it's really pathological. If you look at the way that these guys are talking about the relationship between the sexes, I mean, Chesterton talks about a battle to the death, but these guys are talking domination and cruelty. And I wonder how the species survived if all these men were so brutal to all these women. You know, I mean, it's like they've never met women, you know, like, I don't know how long that would be tolerated. And I think Chesterton makes that point too, you know, like, yeah, have you met women? I don't think they would go for that. So Chesterton was certainly better equipped to answer some of those questions, it seems, than some of his colleagues.
Right. I'm also struck by the, I don't know, it just seems like, to use strong words, it's like the satanic inversion of the way Wells is trying to create, he's trying to say that, the structure of the family was projected up into the stars and became this idea of an immortal God, right? Whereas, you know, we as Christians believe it was, in fact, the exact opposite. It's the fatherhood of God that becomes like the stamp, becomes like the pattern of all human interactions. And there's a verse on this that or two verses that I always go back to. Ephesians 3:14 and 15. And St. Paul, he says that God the Father, he uses this phrase, God the Father, from which every family is named, from which every family on, and you say like, well, what does that mean, is named, right? Because, okay, what is the similarity in English between father and family? I don't know, it starts with F. In Greek, though, father is pater and family is patria. And so Paul doesn't, when Paul does it, it's not a pun, right? It's a paranomasion, right? Let the reader understand. But there's wordplay here, right? That the fatherhood, pater, God the Father, he is the stamp, he's the pattern from which, like, these healthy and life-giving structures that we have here in this world, the patria, the family, it descends from heaven, from the fatherhood of God. Wells turns it exactly on its head, and he says, it's projected from us, from our taboos, our, like the abusive, tyrannical fathers, and that this is projected up into the sky and becomes, the ancestral Father God. And like it's poison.
It really is kind of like a glorification of original sin, isn't it? It's sort of like that we come from the mud, and we're all flawed, and we just want to hurt each other, and
Good
that we
point.
made
That's
out of
great.
that.
A glorification of original sin. That's a great insight, Grettelyn.
That's all I got. I'm drop the mic and leave now.
I can leave too. That's all I needed.
But yeah, no, you just said it so well, Ted. It's just pulling, all the muck. Let's bring up all the muck instead of bringing down all the wonderful things we could be having from God.
Yeah, and I compare that. So what G.K. Chesterton does at the end of this chapter, it's funny. I was talking with actually a teacher at the local Chesterton Academy here, literature and philosophy professor Daniel Berriman, and when I mentioned that I was, going to be this guest, that I had this great honor of being a guest on this book club, he said, "Oh, what chapter?" And I said, "Oh, it's one of the early chapters." He says, "It's not Professors and Prehistoric Men." I said, "Well, yeah, that is the chapter." He says, "Oh, that's the best chapter in the book." I said, "What? Like, tell me more." And he said, according to him, he said that the last paragraph of this chapter, which is like Grettelyn, like your experience of the, giving Chesterton the benefit of the doubt and reading through to the end, giving him the full chapter to make his point. Right. And like so often he'll do, and you go through, you're going along in the merry romp, the thing about, the dogs working out religious ceremonial. It's like, it's just hilarious about Airy and Ariat putting 2 A's, in the London Underground. Like I'm cracking up, right? Like it's fun. You're on the journey, never suspecting that he's leading up to this. Absolutely. Just this, like, what a gorgeous insight, the way that he ends this chapter. Because he takes the triangle that is the family, and whereas Wells is this like satanic inversion, right? Chesterton does this divine inversion when the child becomes the Christ child, right? And he like when I got to that, you just like, you put down the book and you get up and you go, light a pipe and you go for a walk, right?
Yeah.
And what I really wanted, when Susan told me that Dale would actually be here, I want to hear Dale's take on that, if I can. Like if I can like, sit back and just be a fanboy, right? Like what can you exposit this? This because like the whole second half of the book, it's like you see at the end of this chapter that it's already in Chesterton's head and he knows where he's going.
Well, I think in our study questions we get to this, but the point is, Chesterton says the family is one of those universal things that has always existed, and the family comes before civilization. The family the family which is created by attraction as opposed to coercion, which is how the state operates. The family is the basic unit of society, and this is a theme that Chesterton refers to again and again. So civilization starts with the family, and civilization ends with the family. That's the ultimate thing in civilization. Civilization is built on the family. If you have a strong family, you have a strong civilization. But Chester does something takes it one step more, because he will eventually get to the Holy Family as the model of the family, and his point in this chapter of concluding with the family is that this is the essential movement of mankind. A man and a woman come together and they create something new together, and that new thing is its own unit, and that the family is a unit, and we are reacting against that fundamental truth for the rest of history, as we are reacting against it right now. But by Chesterton establishing it right away at the beginning of history, at the beginning of known civilization, it starts with this unit of mother, father, child. And that's what builds the world. It comes out of that unit. And it's not like the it's not like the animals that are mating and creating their offspring. This is something else. That when human father and mother come together and create a child, they're the ones that create civilization of that, because there's order to it.
Yeah.
There's tradition to it. There's creativity, which is art, and all the other elements come together in the family. And what the biblical story gives us is the first father and mother and their children, and it's a story of love, and it's also a great story of heartbreak. And that's the story that is really going to be told for the rest of the human story.
And it's such an intentional act of the will that they do that, that the human beings participate with the creator, not just in this sort of like physical anatomical way, like you said, and then at the end of your commentary, this beautiful quote, that says the triangle of truisms of father, mother, and child cannot be destroyed. It can only destroy those civilizations which disregard it. I think, he says it all right there, that this is definitely something where, we ignore it at our peril. And yeah. I think that definitely refutes the whole idea of this individualism and this nihilism, that there's no point, or that families started out super brutal and need to have laws and a society and civilization built up, or everybody's just going to be, all the men will be dragging off the women by their hair and treating them horribly. And, this harem. I think Chesterton's horrified by the thought, right? Like, one woman's plenty to deal with. I'm pretty sure that's his
right
philosophy there. So,
there'd probably be a lot.
So, in the book that came out just a few months ago, The Story of the Family.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, wouldn't it be great if somebody wrote a book like synthesizing all of G.K. Chesterton's thought about the family?
We're waiting for someone to do that, but there is until someone does, there is a book that we could use in the meantime.
It's a beautiful anthology.
But one of my introductory chapters in that is called Defending the Triangle. And defending the family means defending the triangle. If you try to redefine a triangle, what you have is no longer a triangle, which is one of Chesterton's points in orthodoxy. It's the triangle's life comes to a lamentable end if you take away the three sides and the three angles. And so it's absolutely fundamental. And the fact that Chesterton concludes this chapter with the family, it's absolutely essential for setting the tone for the rest of the way.
Yeah, it's breathtaking what he did. And when we were talking before, like, what is our answer to this Darwinian attack on everything that we love and hold dear, right? So part of the ground game is going to be, giving them a dose of their own medicine and showing that actually this system that they've constructed to replace, the idea of divine creation is actually full of holes, right? It actually does not stand up to scrutiny. They're not skeptical enough. And I think the other part of it is just simply to thrive, right? To build up a society of these that's founded on the sound geometry of the human family, and like live and grow and thrive, and send your kids to a Chesterton Academy, and rear them on the best of like literature and poetry, and teach them to love the good things that you have loved, and watch as they go out into the world overflowing with this life, and share it in generosity with those who are without. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, like, I really think both parts of the answer are actually here in this chapter.
Absolutely. Woven through all of his work, and what a great evangelization to be an example, kind of like that aphorism to preach the gospel always and use words if necessary. I think definitely Chesterton encourages us to do that. But religion is a universal fact, but what are its universal functions? Chesterton really he discards Wells's theory, that it's some sort of like thing to keep people in line, and the ladies are going to talk about how bad the old man is, so you better be good and don't touch the pipes or whatever warped psychological something happened on that page. Chesterton's a little bit more coherent. So can we talk a little bit about, what are those universal functions that religion has that we see in his book? And I don't know who wants to start. I have a couple ideas, but Ted, do you have something you want to?
We have to make Ted talk first because he's the guest.
He is the special guest.
Yeah.
So hot seat first for Ted.
Yeah. So something that I'm struck by. He shows some of the salient points of all human civilization and in fact religion by way of contrast, and in kind of funny ways. So he starts with whoever it was who made in a very matter-of-fact way stated that human beings are of course they were naked, right? And said like how could you possibly know that in a million years? So he starts by just poking fun and ridiculing that fact, right? But he also, by way of contrast, he talks about the fact that monkeys on page it's on page 68 or 70 that monkeys it is page 68. A monkey does not draw clumsily and a man cleverly. A monkey does not begin the art of representation and a man carry it to perfection. A monkey does not do it at all. He does not begin to do it at all. He does not begin to do it. He does not begin to do it at all. A line of some kind is crossed before the faint line can begin, right? Okay, so he's starting to define what is it that makes for religious ceremonial here. Then on page 74, this is one of my favorite sections of the chapter, right? While it is true that a dog has dreams, while most other quadrupeds do not even seem to have that, we have waited a long time for the dog to develop his dreams into an elaborate system of religious ceremonial. Right? We have waited so long that we have really ceased to expect it. And we no more look to see a dog apply his dreams to ecclesiastical construction than to see him examine his dreams by the rules of psychoanalysis, right? And then I would skip ahead actually all the way here to page 78. All right. We've contrasted with monkeys, we've contrasted with dogs, and now he starts to contrast with certain primitive societies here, right? And showing how unlike the animals, even they have this instinct to cover the holy, right? And so on page 78, we hail a certain human Freemasonry wherever we see it, in savages, in foreigners, or in historical characters. For instance, all we can infer from primitive legend and all we know of barbaric life supports a certain moral and even mystical idea of which the commonest symbol is clothes. For clothes are very literally vestments, and man wears them because he is a priest. It is true that even as an animal, he is here different from the animals. Nakedness is not nature to him. It is not his life, but rather his death, even in the vulgar sense of his death of cold. But clothes are worn with dignity or decency or decoration, where they are not in any way wanted for warmth. It would sometimes appear that they are valued for ornament before they are valued for use, right? And like this observation and the point continues here, that this is something that all human beings share, which is completely different. Like, you don't see a dog walking around in a mitre and say, oh wow, that's a really important dog, right? You don't see a monkey with a crozier, right? But human beings in every society, you have this ceremonial, you have this sense of sanctity set apart by the way that we dress, right? I would say that one of the points that he draws out here, and in keeping with the distinctions that he's making, but he's starting to build up something positively.
Well, that's it. Very good. He also explains why it leads to the family, but I think the basic answer to the question of the universal functions of religion is we've totally got to. Ted nailed it. But number one, it protects dignity. Religion protects dignity, and number two, religion deals with sin. And the Chesterton line, which probably is right. This is from my own notes here, so I have to say that it's on page. It's on page something. You'll find it there. Whatever else men may have believed, they have all believed that there is something the matter with mankind.
On page 79.
That's where I would have put it.
Yes, that's right where it is.
This sense of sin has made it impossible to be natural and have no clothes, just as it has made it impossible to be natural and have no laws. And you can see why this is going to lead to the family, because there has to be something that protects sex. There has to be something that protects sex, and that is the family.
Yeah. This line on the bottom of page 81 is just so perfect. Round the family do indeed gather the sanctities that separate men from ants and bees. Decency is the curtain of that tent. Liberty is the wall of that city. Property is but the family farm. Honor is but the family flag. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And his view of men too, they're not, he says in the middle of that page 81, he says, so he became the head of the family, not as a bully with a big club to beat women with, but rather as a respectable person trying to be a responsible person. So Chesterton sees this order into the universe, this reflection of the Holy Family, this reflection of the Creator in man. Sure, we have original sin, and we have a way to deal with that sin, through the Catholic Church, through religion, through Christianity, but we are not fundamentally wicked. We have this sort of divine nature within us. And I think that view that Chesterton has, where we're always seeking to get back to God, but that we somehow will be able to correspond with that grace because we were created to be able to correspond. It's joy, it's hope. It makes me feel, like there might be a chance for me. Thank you, GK. It's beautiful.
Wonderful. Well, someone in the chat, I think Val BF, said, can we articulate the thesis of this chapter? So I'm going to throw that out as a bonus question. And
I want to hear what Ted has to say.
Yeah.
Thesis of the chapter. It's a great question. Yeah. I don't know. I keep returning to the end. The section here on the after having exploded, and that which he takes most of the chapter actually doing, exploded, these kind of fanciful and not skeptical enough illusions, right? These kind of figments that Chesterton actually puts us back down on solid ground. And I think it's pages 81 and 82, this kind of lapidary section at the end of the chapter. It's when he's through, it's when he's through, clearing the ground, right? And he's ready to state his thesis. Okay, if you want to understand the basis, right, of human civilization, it has to be, the basis has to be on this, right? It's on the family, it's on mother, father, and child. Right. And it not father as bully, not father as, slave master or as polygamist. Right. But, father as, repentant sinner doing the best he can. Dale, like you said, the law of attraction, right? Another way of putting this, the foundation of human society is this love, right? I think that in terms of a thesis, right?
Yeah,
I think that's when he states something positively,
right?
And he's had to take all of this time getting rid of the false answers before he can propose his own.
Yeah, and I think also the thesis of the chapter is simply a support for the thesis of part 1.
Yeah,
which is that man is a creature different from other animals. Man is not just an animal. We established that in the first chapter, that first of all, man is an artist. The other animals are not artists.
Mm-hmm.
But the other point now he's making is what we learned from prehistoric man, by digging up his bones, is all speculation, and and try to just fit this into a Darwinian explanation of man is simply not satisfying. It's not a satisfying answer. It doesn't explain how we got to where we are. Chesterton's point, the main thing that happens before history, before recorded history, is the family, which is the basis of civilization.
Which is what we have evidence for.
Yeah.
But we don't know what we don't know. I would say that's the other part of what he's really saying is that, this absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, that we can't posit things based on no evidence, based on our worldview, that's
Right.
just an artificial way of looking at the world.
Yeah, he has a line that says you can't write prehistory because it's before history. So
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's the problem with prehistory. You can't read it. You just can't read prehistory.
No.
And as a mathematician, I have to say, I love that he defines terms. It's so good to have great definitions, because sometimes we throw around words and things and we have no idea what we're actually saying. So he gets really precise with some of his definitions. And sometimes, like you said, with the church father, you were talking about Irenaeus's against heresies, just defining what the heresy was enough to explode it. Yep. So sometimes just defining terms is enough to make the whole point. And Chesterton does that so well throughout this chapter and throughout this book.
Yeah.
So
we have a question that I just feel like we need to address, and it's from Val BF. How does Chesterton believe that polytheism came about? Did he miss that? No, you didn't miss it. It's in the next couple chapters. Chesterton will explain polytheism. It's one of the main things that is talked about in part 1. So keep reading, stay tuned. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's the answer to your question. You got to keep reading, and you got to keep coming back every Wednesday. We'll get to the mini gods. We'll get to them.
Absolutely. Right. And it looks like we are about out of time. We've got an hour here and we want to respect people's time. So I want to mention that next Wednesday is G.K. Chesterton's 150th birthday. And so we will be here with Nancy and Noel, Nancy Brown and Noel Culbertson. It's going to be an amazing time. We're talking about chapter 3, the antiquity of civilization. But tune in. You will see on your G.K. Chesterton email, you will see a 150th birthday party celebration that will start at 6 Central, 7 Eastern. So tune into that and then switch over to our live stream at 7 Central, 8 Eastern. We would love to have you. Our discussions, as always, are recorded and accessible. Invite your friends to join. Never too late. We do have a playlist. Bookmark that playlist. You can go back and reference these. You can invite your friends to join us. We will all be at the conference in Philadelphia, and we would love to see you there. You never know who might show up. You might be sitting around and Dale's going to pop in on your conversation. This has happened.
The old man himself.
The old man.
The old man.
Don't touch his pipe. I've heard it's really bad. That could be dangerous. So you just want to avoid that. But as long as you do that, that's fine. And on a personal note, for his 150th birthday, we are trying to get 150 new knights. And I just want to tell you a small testimonial. I am a knight of the apostolate before I even started working for them. And, the reason I became a knight was because he changed my life. I saw the way that he talked about women, and I heard something that I hadn't heard before, and it really changed my life. And then, so he interceded in that sort of ordinary way, and then he interceded in extraordinary ways for me. So I talked about this at a conference. We might put that in the pin that in the comments. I'd love for you to see that. But if Chesterton has done something to change your life, if reading him has made a difference, I just want to encourage you to consider monthly support as a knight. If you can support us monthly, that frees Grettelyn up to do the amazing work that she does instead of having to do the development work. And it really gives us the ability to bring quality programs to you and to be able to, we have a lot of visions. We need some people to implement those visions. So we need to build the organization so that we can do all of the good works that have been prepared for us to walk in. So
I just want to chime in real quick and say
Yes.
thank you to all the knights that I see in the comments too.
Oh, yes.
So great to have you joining us. And we hope that many of you who are not knights and in the comments will please join those ranks. It's a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, consider it. And you can check it out at the link there, and just consider making a recurring donation. It will really help us out. So we are so happy to have you with us. We are looking forward to seeing you next week when Nancy Brown and Noelle join us. And thank you, Dale, for joining us. Thank you so much, Ted. It was a privilege and an honor.
Thank you so much. Great to see you, Ted. God bless you.
God bless you. This is so fun. I can't
Yes.
believe that we get to do this.
And check out Ted's YouTube channel. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. If you want to laugh your butt off hearing something about infant baptism, I mean, he is the place to go. I don't want to ruin it for you. You just gotta, it's film noir. It's the church fathers. It's all there. I can't wait for the next episode in the franchise. It's amazing. So thank you, Ted.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And until next week, Chesterton is better with friends. And we thank you so much for joining us. And until next week, have a good night.
Bless.